Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Object Relations Institute. I'm Dr. Susan Kavaler-Adler. I'm the founder and executive director of the Object Relations Institute. We began classes in 1990, 1991, so we've been around almost about 35 years now. And every year we've had open houses. We generally have two of them. And you're all welcome to attend all of them, which are free for the public. So today I'm going to be focusing my initial comments on the theme of self-sabotage. And then there are three parts to this, at least three, four if we include questions about the Institute program, so which of course is always a part of an open house. The first part, I'll be giving some comments on self-sabotage as a theme and theories related to it. And then in our second part, I will be doing a role play experience with Dr. Loray Daws, who is a faculty member and board member of our institute. And some of you may have taken his course this spring. And he will be presenting a patient around the theme of self-sabotage. And I believe it will be a borderline patient, so we can get into all issues of developmental arrest and how that affects self-sabotage that is perpetuated. And after we do and I'll be playing the role of the therapist, he'll be playing the role of his patient. This is also how I conduct my monthly role play supervision group, is where each person presenting gets inside the internal world and skin of their patient and becomes them in the role play, and I play the role of therapist. We also have classes at our institute on that role play supervision, so it's something I do quite frequently, and I've done it many times with Loray Daws, so I look forward to that. And then after that, I'm going to conduct a group experience using my meditative visualizations, meditative psychic visualization approach, which I do in my monthly morning therapy and support group with meditative psychic visualization, the sharing of that. But I'm going to be doing the meditative visualization around the theme of self-sabotage today. And following that, any of you that, if we don't have enough time for any questions, please feel free to stay at the end and ask me. But I can speak very briefly about the overall programs, which are all on the website. But if anyone has any questions about specific requirements, I'll either answer them or refer you to the website or to Dr. Ina Rosenzweig, our administrator, for more information. Okay, so that's the outline of the day. And I'll begin now with some thoughts about self-sabotage. I'm sure each of you has your own thoughts related to your patients, related to your own experience. We all certainly have experienced self-sabotage in our lives. But sometimes it becomes a chronic problem or part of a whole pathology. So that's, of course, related to the distinctions to be made. So I want to mention one of my published books. I have 7 published books and many, many articles, but one of them is called The Anatomy of Regret, From Death Instinct to Reparation and Symbolization in Vivid Case Studies. And in that book, each of the cases, and this is a very clinical book, each of the cases is about someone who was able to go through psychic change through getting to a level of mourning and psychic regret. And this also relates back to Melanie Klein's theory. And I will be saying I'll be speaking to Klein and to Fairbairn today, along with my own theories of developmental mourning versus pathological mourning in terms of the demon lover complex. So in that book, I was talking about, I was showing, actually illustrating through cases, that each of these people had gotten to a depressive position level of experience where they could mourn. And part of that mourning, a la Klein, where the depressive position is always about loss and guilt, never just about loss and separation, but about loss and guilt. So in the depressive position, one becomes capable of owning one's own aggression and all of one's inner world experiences and what one puts out in the world. And so there's guilt and there's loss. And there is in the depressive position, there's also the possibility of reparation, which it can involve accountability, acknowledging one's part in thing, and also apologies sometimes. But it has to do with ownership, particularly of one's aggression and inclining thinking. So, but what I was speaking about in that book through these cases is how when one faces one's regrets consciously as opposed to denying them or keeping them unconscious, parts of the personality dissociated that would inform one of one's own regrets. When it becomes conscious, one has the chance to stop the kind of behaviors that recreate the regret over again. So it definitely involves self-sabotage. And in the possibility of consciousness, one can own one's regrets as opposed and work through the mourning of the loss and guilt involved, and therefore not have to keep repeating the same self-sabotaging activities, whether it's towards the self or definitely inclining in terms of hurting the one loves. Um, so in terms of hurting oneself or others, but it's not just enough to be conscious. One has to go beyond any intellectual level of consciousness and be able to, as I said, experience a level of mourning and regret. Otherwise, you get inclining in terms manic reparation as opposed to true reparation. And that's where you might acknowledge something that, but then you do the same thing over and over and you never really reflect or resolve it or stop doing what the self-sabotaging behavior is. And in self-sabotage, I'm including hurting the one you love, hurting the other, because when we sabotage the other, hurt the other, we're sabotaging our own relationships. So to get to that point of the cases in this book, you really have to go through um, an effective level of mourning and regret. It's not just intellectual consciousness of what you did that could lead to manic reparation, but it's an inward, heartfelt feeling of regret towards the other that you've hurt or towards yourself that you've hurt in order to really change behavior and to change patterns of compulsive self-sabotage. Um, and each of the cases speaks to that, where people have gone through a whole developmental mourning process. If someone, now in the depressive position, there's the manic defense against the depressive position of loss and guilt. So you get manic reparation, but you can also regress back or be stuck in the paranoid-schizoid position, which is where it relates to developmental arrest and primal splitting and dissociation of character disorders. And in that position, you're not dealing with manic reparation or true reparation. You're dealing with um, fear of retaliation and compulsions to retaliate. So you're not at a level yet of guilt and loss. You don't have whole object relations, subjective self, symbolization. You're in a more primitive state in the paranoid schizoid position. And there you can regress back to that, or you can be stuck there through developmental arrest in a way where you're not moving towards the capacity for the effect of working through a loss and guilt in the depressive position. And in that position, people may talk about guilt, but often that's a misnomer and it's an incorrect use of language because they're really talking about fears of retaliation when they're in the paranoid-schizoid position. They're not talking about genuine guilt. They're talking about a fear that they'll be caught or they'll be retaliated against for their behavior, and that they're afraid of the consequences of that, and they may be caught up in the cycle of retaliation, revenge, and of course fears of retaliation. And that's where someone has not gotten to the depressive position, the capacity for regret that could genuinely change one's self-sabotaging behavior through loss, through the deeply heartfelt, affective feeling of loss and guilt. And now a few words about Fairbairn here. In Fairbairn speaks about a primal split in the self that relates to the actual toxic behavior of parents who can be, and he worked with children who were foster children, running back to the bad object parent always, because that was the primal parent, but they were addicted to that parent, but there was actual abuse, neglect, abandonment, in some cases, severe abuse. So he was always talking, unlike Klein or Freud Klein talking about psychic fantasy, Freud talking about both fantasy but also impulses and drives. With Fairbairn, you're talking about the actual trauma from real parental neglect and abuse. And he talks about then splitting, not just in terms of a primal natural splitting and integration later, or where splitting happens because of um, um, defensive processes that recreate the splitting rather than self-integration. He's talking about a primal split and a developmental arrest. And one part of the self is so dissociated from the other part of the self that it doesn't know what's coming around the bend every cycle, and it's in a closed system. Every cycle, those of you who may have listened to our lectures from David Selene, who always talks about Fairbairn's theory, talks about this with the anti-libidinal ego and libidinal ego. So the libidinal ego is like also, when you look at it with the developmental arrest and the tragic but definitely toxic parenting, or the absence of parenting, then you have this um, uh, libidinal ego that's like a child self trying to change the parent all the time, and every single time gets rejected, abused again, or abandoned again, whatever it is, every time they come around. It's like the other shoe is inevitably going to drop because they get the same thing in the closed system of the internal bad object parent attacking or abandoning or rejecting in this toxic way. So one side of the personality doesn't know what the other side is doing, where the part of them is aligned with the toxic parent, which Fairbairn then referred to as demons at one point in his writings, and then bad objects. He talked about internal saboteurs before he consolidated that into the overall retaliatory anti-libidinal ego. So the internal saboteurs were in his first theories, then he consolidated into the anti-libidinal ego to make more of a view of psychic structure. And but all within a closed system. So the child is forced to identify when there's in Fairbairn's word, you're in a house where you're starving, but the only thing to eat is a poison pie, you'll eat the poison pie. So that was an analogy to the parent, that if the parent is toxic and poisonous, it's the only parent you have or the only primary mother, because all of this is brought back to very early primal mother failing. And then there can be also toxic fathering and siblings, etc. But it all goes back to the primal toxic experience with the mother when the self is first forming in the first 3 years of life. So there's a not only is there a repetition of the abuse and toxic behavior, but there's a forced psychological identification with what's then called the bad object parent. So in Fairbairn's words, you take the bad object in to try to control it, and it ends up controlling you. And then you get ongoing, repetitions of self-sabotaging cycles. Um, so, but there's a compulsion to identify. And even going back to Freud in Mourning and Melancholia, where he talks first, for the first time really in object relations terms, about the shadow of the object falling on the ego, that the child with the parent, the object, is forced to, the shadow of the parent falls on the ego or the self because the child is compelled to identify with the parents. So the shadow of the object falls on the ego. So there's a compulsion to identify with the only parent you have, with a primal parent, even though it's a bad parent in the case of traumatic parenting, and which causes developmental arrest. And when you have that, you have a whole split between this libidinal ego child kind of self that's constantly trying to change the parent and get a response, trying to master the trauma, but at the same time, a whole other part of the self is identified with the parent and becomes the anti-libidinal ego in a punitive retaliatory action against the libidinal ego child self. So it's always coming around the mountain in the closed system is the retaliatory attack of the bad object parent that's been taken into the internal world and therefore controls one from within. And because of the dissociation at that primal level of the split, the libidinal ego keeps trying and trying and trying. Um, and the anti-libidinal ego keeps coming around the mountain and attacking, abusing, or whatever in this toxic way again. So these two parts of the personality create all kinds of self-sabotaging cycles because the child self can never, without intervention from the outside of the closed system through therapy, there's no way that libidinal ego can get agency to deal with the anti-libidinal ego part that's identified with the rejecting object in Fairbairn's terms. Okay, so taking in the bad object and identifying with it creates cycles of bad object experience and the repetition of trauma. And there's constant self-sabotage without being able to free oneself to change one's own way of relating or who one relates to. One's stuck in this closed system with the original bad object that's been internalized and has so much power from within now because of the primal level of identification. We're really talking about incorporation, identification at a very primitive level. There are many different levels of identification, but this is like primal incorporation of the other and it merged with a whole part of the self, and it which is dissociated from the other child self or the libidinal ego part. And so we get, of course, in this closed system, we also, everything is black and white, everything is all or nothing. There is no nuance, there is no central ego in Fairbairn's terms that can get healthy internalizations from loving parents in order to grow. So the central ego has been um, aborted and would have to grow later through internalizing good objects, but Fairbairn doesn't deal with that in his theory because he only focused on the pathology of internalizing bad objects. But later on, theorists have added, the actuality of internalizing good objects, but that only comes later with therapy and an intervention over time that allows this closed system to be penetrated. And when you have this either or black and white split world with dissociated parts of the self that keep enacting things on each other, but never engaging in a way that could lead to self-integration and further development, stuck in that place, there's a lack in Winnicott's terms of transitional space. So as a therapist, it's very frustrating because you don't have the transitional space to in any way do any kind of psychoanalytic work. There's no freedom of the person to have thoughts or feelings or even know that they're having thoughts and feelings. They're just enacted upon from within, and they react and enact and evacuate affect and just enact things with the therapist in a kind of perverse way. So there is no actual transitional space that would allow for two separate people to have an intersubjective experience or to communicate or have conversation. It's just action and reaction. And this is where, of course, the countertransference becomes so dicey about how one contains this and tries to learn about the split off libidinal part of the child self and the internalized parent through countertransference experience of what one feels with the projective identification of the patient into you with all this, but you have to contain it. But there's that compulsion that induced in the therapist to enact to and to react because the patient is constantly just acting and reacting. So there's a compulsion that one can feel and has to separate from in order to do the work of the treatment, to not just react in kind like the patient is, but to try to contain and tolerate it, to learn about these internal psychic structures in the patient through what you experience phenomenologically in the engagement with the patient. But there's so much projective identification that becomes very difficult to do. So it's quite a different kind of treatment than when you have transitional space. You have the level where you get to psychoanalytic space, where the person is separate enough to have their own thoughts and feelings and be able to reflect or talk about dreams or thoughts or fantasies and talk about those in the space in between, in that transitional space between the analyst and the patient. That's a whole other level of experience. And you can do that with character disorder patients that are stuck at this place of primal splitting and dissociation. So it's like a whole different kind of treatment that needs to be done. And so you can learn so much about character disorders when we talk about self-sabotage. One way of thinking about it is when someone's bulimic and they're hungering for the sweet, loving mother that was lost in developmental arrest, and they eat food as a way of trying, and they can get addicted to sugar and taking it in as a way of trying to swallow the longed for lost um, the mother before the trauma in some cases. So they eat all the food, but then they can't digest the food, just like they can't psychically digest the mother. There is, first of all, they don't have the ego capacities because we talked about there's no central ego developing, which also involves all kinds of ego functions that can only come about sometimes through developmental mourning. So their ego isn't operating in a way where they could digest the food mother that they take, and then they can get addicted to sugar and too in the concrete reality of the food. But that can be true in overeating, but in the bulimic, when they can't digest mother, they throw up bad mommy because when they can't digest her, they it turns toxic. It becomes the bad object that's taken in to control it, and then it controls you. So they want to vomit. So they get to vomit to get up the bad mother. So it's a continuing cycle of taking in the hope for a good mother, like the libidinal ego, hoping mommy will be different. They'll get the good food this time. And then they take it in and it turns all bad inside. And then they want to vomit it up because it becomes bad mother. And in this split of all good or all bad. And that becomes a self-sabotaging behavior where the person might very much want to stop this and eat normally and be able to eat normal amounts of food and sustain digestion and eat healthy things, but it all gets screwed up by the developmental arrest and the compulsion to take in a mother and then vomiting her up because she becomes toxic inside, just like the object, part object, bad object becomes toxic when one takes it in and incorporates it, and then it is identified with it and has the anti-libidinal ego that's then, saying, "Oh, you're such a fat slob, you have to," so you vomit it up because the anti-libidinal ego is shouting at you about it. So that's just an example in a kind of bulimic pattern. I'm sure you all have your own thoughts or examples of things like that. I did want to mention the transitional space related to Winnicott. I also want to mention when there's a lack of good enough mothering in Winnicott's sense, that means that the mother hasn't been able to be there with the child when they're becoming separate and when they need to play along with the mother being present but not intruding with her own needs or demands for what she wants a child to be. So we have the paper and um, capacity to be alone where the mother or the therapist needs to be in a place where they're with the other but not intervening in a way that feels like a taking over and an intrusion. This could be with the mother, with the play of the child, just being with the child when it plays, but not intruding on saying, don't be playing or do this now, or why don't you color with that color, not that one. That would be some, mild kind of intrusion of the mother. So for Winnicott, the capacity to be alone relates to internalizing instead of the bad object mother, the split bad object mother I was talking about, but it involves internalizing a good enough mothering experience where the mother wasn't only there in this first stage, well, for Winnicott, which was the primal unity for Margaret Mahler as a symbiosis. But then all the problems can start with some character disorder patients, not in the symbiosis stage, but in separation individuation. And so you get the mother who might have been okay as a symbiotic mother, especially if she's borderline. She wants the kid to be her mommy. She'll like the symbiosis. But then when separation starts to happen and the kid needs autonomy or disagrees with her, speaks up and says no, or what, and doesn't want to be held all the time, whatever the mother isn't getting her cravings for unmet mothering met with the child. Then she rejects, she withdraws, but narcissistic mothers withdraw with, yeah, anyway, there are different things with the borderline, the narcissist, the borderline mother pulling the kid into regressive symbiosis or else abandoning and not being there effectively. The narcissistic mother withdrawing and abandoning when the child can't perform and is emotionally needy in separation individuation. So it varies, or the schizoid mother that goes back to the beginning of separation individuation with differentiation and even before practicing period and rapprochement. And then you get, even a more primitive kind of retaliatory withdrawal from the mother if the child is in a slave to the mother, and you get a master slave psychic structure in the schizoid, or else total abandonment and being off in the stratosphere without any object connection. So they're different for the different character disorders, but there is the same thing about at separation individuation, particularly as James Masterson talks about in his theories. That's when the failing of the mother happens. And in Winnicott's terms, it would be a failing of the mother to be there and be separate and be with the other without it taking over or causing developmental arrest through her demands from the child for her mothering. And also in Winnicott, you have the capacity for concern. And none of that can develop, which involves concern for the self, which one needs to intervene with one's own self-sabotage. Not only the growth of reparation to resolve and repair compulsions to hurt the one loves, as in Kleinian theory, but also to to show compassion for oneself. Now, Kleinians got to this later in their own way. Winnicott talked about his capacity for concern, which he also related to Klein's depressive position. So she talks about mourning and guilt and loss, and he talks about capacity for concern. So there too, you have to have a good enough mothering object to have capacity to be alone, capacity for concern, and that means that the mother has enough transitional space in her own psyche or psychic space in her own psyche to allow the child its autonomy as it goes through separation, which involves development towards autonomy and its own personality separate from her. So there are so many times that the mother can't do that and can't be good enough in the way of being a good enough mother of separation, individuation, even if she was a good enough mother in the symbiosis period, or what Winnicott calls the time of primal unity, where the fusion of the self and other is there, and the infant has the idealized illusion of the mother without having to deal with the real mother yet. And all that goes back to Klein. Every single thing Winnicott ever wrote goes back to Klein, including he's very original, but he was always being inspired by needing to either evolve or contradict in certain critical ways Kleinian theory, and not so much contradict, actually, accept it, but more bring in the whole area of the external object and the environment and the environmental mother that Klein didn't deal with, and only focusing on the internal world, psychic fantasy of the internal world, interpretations of the internal world. So, so Winnicott was always inspired by Klein, even in the true and false self. He was talking about something that related back to Klein on true and false and true and manic reparation. So you can't name anything about Winnicott's theory that I can't point to. Klein was saying this, and that's why he went there, because he was trying to have a conversation with her, but she had limitations in that area because of her narcissism. So he wrote it out and created his own theory. Okay, well, I'm giving you a little bit. Of course, every single theorist in object relations theory, British and American theory, can be can be pinpointed to in terms of specific things related to self-sabotage. Um, Michael Balin talks about primary love and when that gets sabotaged, and the difference between malignant regression and benign regression in therapy, and malignant regression being when the patient cannot stop trying to change the therapist, as opposed to benign regression, where the patient can regress and experience what's going on within them that's creating the problems for them. So you have to deal with more malignant regression when you're dealing with character disorders and these primal developmental arrests. Okay. Um, so my intention today is not to spend that much time on lecturing because we have a lot of other things to do. So, of course, there'll be time for questions. But at the moment, unless anyone has any pressing questions or clinical examples they want to give, I'm going to move on to the role play with Loray Daws because we can have a lot of discussion after that with a specific case that we have right in front of us where we do the role play. So if it's all right with everyone, I'm going to move on and ask Dr. Daws, Loray Daws, to join me in the role play. I have no idea who the person is he's presenting, other than knowing it's a borderline patient. So I do this very spontaneously. I just respond as a clinician to however he presents himself in the role play, just like I do with the people who present in my groups for supervision. Just respond in the moment to what they express or however they are in being their patient. So that's what we're going to do today. There hasn't been any rehearsal of this. It's just he has thought about the patient he's going to present, and he'll start to play the patient in a session with me, and I'll respond to that. Okay, so Loray, where are you?
Great.
All right.
Dr. Susan, I'll just give some background of the client and then I'll start with the most recent session. It's still early days. I've only seen this client for 8 months. He's a 55-year-old male, and he's going through his second divorce. He describes himself as a workaholic, and presented with an immense amount of anxiety due to the divorce. He mentioned that he feels a bit like Humpty Dumpty, that he's trying to put his life back together, and he was pleading with his wife to return, which he didn't want to do. So there's immense separation anxiety present. He's been married 28 years and he's got two full-grown sons, both engineers that are quite well adapted in their 20s. He does financial work, and he has a high post. So in terms of his day-to-day, he seems to be functioning very high. But emotionally, as I go into some detail, he's been struggling since childhood, given our exploration. One sees a lot of the rejecting object, alluring object, enticing object realities between him and his mother. And with his wife, his first and second wife too, he was briefly married in his 20s, 5 years, to a woman that he said, quote unquote, I think I was over reliant on her. And it was a shock to me in our last 2 years of marriage that she said she would like to remain married, but preferred a gay lifestyle and would have liked an open marriage, which I could not do. And therefore we got divorced. I still find it painful to think about. When we explored a little bit around the relationship, he seemed quite reliant on her. He said it wasn't so much that she preferred an open marriage, is he said he constantly felt paranoid that he's going to lose it to someone else. So it had nothing to do with Oedipal sexuality, or the lack of sexuality, rather than he fears that he'll lose her as a form of support. She initiated the divorce proceedings, and he was alone for about 2 years when he got to married to his current wife. And I'll give a little bit of history of her, just some background. He was the only child, um, and he said he was very close to his mother. And I'm quoting from him. Um, I was close to my mom. I'm not always sure if this closeness was out of her need or mine. Even now, as an adult, I struggle to keep boundaries up with her. She would phone me and be very demanding, and I'll be left very depressed. Um, and when he was in adolescence, he mentioned that his mom would frequently make him feel guilty if he wanted to do things. She would subtly withdraw from him and said she becomes suicidal. So he felt manipulated to remain with her. His father was a very absent man, worked like him, workaholic. And when he tried to talk to his dad about his mom, he would say, "Don't bother me with this kind of nonsense. Do what your mom asks you to do." So he felt left to his mom's demands. There was also an adolescence that seemed Oedipal in nature. He said if his mom got depressed, she took to bed, and then she would ask him to come lie in bed with her, that he found very anxiety provoking. Um, he said it's not so much that he was in bed with his mom, then he felt overwhelmed by his mom's moods. So he would avoid her, whereafter she would withdraw from him. Some background just with his current wife, he said, with Susie, I'll just call her Susie, I was the one that worked, and she was the one that ran the household. I think I was very reliant on her. Um, she was quite critical on me, and I sometimes felt that I wasn't good enough, but I just worked hard and gave her more what she needed. It was mostly material things. Um, any emotional needs I had, she said I was too demanding and would withdraw from me. And there seems to be parallels with his developmental history. The last few years have been very difficult for me. I feel that she's withdrawing more and more, and that doesn't matter what I tried to do, nothing was good enough. Um, I felt a growing anger in me, and it's something that I couldn't show her. I feel completely lost, thinking at my age I have to rebuild a life for myself. I'm anxious, I feel panicky, I'm seeing the doctor for my heart. I feel cut in two. The one part I feel I just want to give it all up and run away, and another part I feel I can't do without her. This is a horrible time in my life. I can't sleep and I can't eat. I wish I addressed these issues earlier in my life. I'm now in a terrible situation, but I wish she would come back. His wife moved out 6 months ago, and he's been trying to woo her back, which is very problematic. So that's just some very synoptic summary of some of the material in the last 8 months. And I'll try to bring more in the session with you, Dr. Susan.
Yeah, I'm going to request a 5-minute bathroom break before we begin. Okay, so Loray's given an introduction to his case, although he said it was a composite, he speaking mainly about dynamics of certain borderline patients, and obviously someone who's in a lot of pain at the moment, and dealing with the trauma of separation, being re-traumatized through separation and fear of losing support in a primal way of the primal object support being projected into the spouse and the loss of the spouse. Okay, so let's begin, and I just
Thank you, Doctor. You can hear me.
Seems okay. All
Excellent.
right. All right.
Dr. Susan, I'm relieved I'm seeing you again. It was a horrid week. Um, I can't sleep. My anxiety has been through the roof. I can't concentrate at work, which is making it worse. Um, I'm desperate to find a way to get Susan back. I know she's not good for me. There's a part of me that knows this has been bad for a very long time. This week I was speaking to a friend, one of my oldest friends, and he said to me, James, this has been bad for a long time. And it's like I can hear what they say, but I can't take it in. When I'm alone, all I think about is trying to get her back. Um, and I know it sounds completely irrational, but when I walk home and it's that emptiness, and I feel I'm going to get a panic attack.
Mm,
It's so empty. I'll do anything. I just want to hear her voice or speak to her. And it's like everything you and I talk about, everything that my friends tell me about, even my memories of how she pissed me off and um, would only do what she wanted. It's like it doesn't exist. In that moment, all I want is for her just to come back. We could work at this. We can find a better way. No one's marriage is perfect. No one's marriage is perfect. And I'm willing.
mm,
I'm more than willing to try. Um, anything. It's like I argue in my mind with myself. I'm 55. What am I going to do now?
mm.
My second marriage. Um, what am I going to do now?
So you feel all alone in the world there with that absence and that emptiness. It doesn't, you don't even recall at that time or at this time as you speak about it, how you felt it was so horrible with her. Now you're just so aware of how horrible it feels without her. And you keep hoping that maybe there'll be some way of bringing her back, even though when you've tried in the past, it's always failed.
Mm,
It when you're in this place of just utter desolation without her and trying to hear her voice to have some sense of her, you totally are not feeling or remembering the how it actually was when you felt it was too difficult to be with her, or how you felt it was so um, overwhelmingly bad for you when she was there with you and you kept complaining of her
mm,
controlling everything. That's
mm,
all gone
mm.
now
It's
when you're in
gone.
this state, right? This is like a totally different state of existence that you feel now.
It's as if this loneliness is worse than her constant critique of me, of her, as I mentioned to you, nothing felt good enough. I just worked harder, did more. There was always something that was not good enough or was not right. I mentioned to you we haven't been even intimate in 2 years, um, but this feels worse. I'll rather keep with that. That's man. I can do something about that.
Mm.
Can't do anything about this. And my friends constantly remind me just of all the negative things, but I'm trying to tell them it was negative, but this is worse. This is worse.
They have no way of comprehending what you feel like inside when you're in all alone this way.
Mm.
They can't. They just trying to be rational and logical about you not wanting her when she was there,
Yeah,
but they are not comprehending how unbelievably unbearable this state of aloneness feels to you.
I when I speak to you, uh, I feel like that when we spoke about being a lost child. Um, I have very similar feelings. It wasn't, well, I can't remember if that was bad when But I'm having similar thoughts than my mom that she was suicidal. I'm also having suicidal thoughts. I want to take to my bed too, but I don't have anyone that will sit with me like I had to sit with my mom. Um, it's like I just want to. It's either I want her back or take to my bed. Um, but I'm, I'm not sure I can keep this up forever. It just feels completely overwhelming, and just negative and hopeless. That there's nothing I can do to bring her back.
Mm.
Nothing. It's like
You don't,
she made up her mind about me, and there's nothing I can do. I've become aware of how reliant I've been on her.
you feel totally helpless without any sense of control or agency to do anything about
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
And then on top of it, you see yourself behaving like your mother, who would
Mm.
want to withdraw to her bed. And you always hated that. You
Mm.
ended up resenting it, even though for so many years you were drawn into it to try to help her and to bring her back because you wanted a mother. But in the end, you got so resentful that she would woo you into this place in her bedroom with her by her threatening suicide. But now you're confronted with actually seeing yourself feel like you want to kill yourself because you can't tolerate what you're feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my wife couldn't tolerate what I felt either. My mom either. I was always with my mom. Uh, if I wanted anything, is I had to do what she wanted to do, or ask too much, or ask your dad. Not that he was available, just in his office working.
There were no options but your
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah. And I always had to do what she wanted to do. Um, I had to be her good boy, and my wife's too, in a way. I don't mean I felt like a small child with her, but my son even said I should say no to her, and stand my ground. But when I do, I just feel I want to say guilty, but that's not the word. I feel if I do that, she gets angry at me, and then she threatens me previously with divorce. So if I say something, I get threatened. Or I don't know
Right.
what I'm talking about. So I just left it. Just left it. But now I'm in this position. Now she did what she wanted to do anyway.
Mm. You're always terrified she would retaliate by leaving you or threaten
She
divorce,
said
and
it
then she did. Yeah.
all the time, all the time. Not in the beginning. In the beginning, um, she would just retreat and be moody with me. Um, and then I would try to make up or say something or
You always
work.
try to placate her
Mm.
and going back into a false self of being the good boy like you did with your mother until you couldn't take it anymore. And then when you started getting angry, she wasn't able to deal with your anger. She just threatened you then. So your
Yeah,
fears of retaliation started becoming true that she was going to threaten divorce. And ultimately, she didn't just threaten, she actually left, and now you feel devastated.
I always had to be the first one to apologize. She never apologized.
Mhm.
I can recall. And even my kids say she's hard-arsed. And I hear them, but I really struggle to see it. Um, well, okay, that's not true. I see it, but I don't want to see it. Because what I don't know what to do about it. Because if I become hard-arsed, she threatens with moods or withdraws from me, doesn't want to talk to me, um, or make comments about me. Um, that I don't know what I'm talking about, or um, um, I shouldn't do it like that. Um, and then I just agree, and I don't want you to get a wrong idea about that. We do get along when we don't fight,
Mm.
um, and that I try not to fight. my internist said, I think he's talking bullshit, but okay, I don't know if these things are true. Is I had an ulcer a few years ago, and he said I must stop swallowing my anger. I think try doing my job. Stress is everywhere, but I think he meant it with my wife. But I
Mhm.
don't. That's before I saw you. I didn't want to get into it with her.
Well, so you don't really believe that your anger could get to such a point that you're putting into your body an actual destruction towards your body through an ulcer, but you were always trying to be the good boy then,
Mm.
that it wasn't just anger, it was this rage that went back to early things with your mother, that could create an ulcer. So I can understand what he said. Um,
I hope
but
you.
but that the thing is that both you and your wife had this sadomasochism inside of you. So you can say there were nice times when you didn't have it, but that it kept coming back because it was in both of you. And it goes back to you and your mother from what's within you.
Oh yeah. You just reminding me once or twice when I got angry at her. My dad got angry at me because he said I'm making her depressed. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about that I'm making her depressed? She's always depressed.
Who said that to you?
My dad,
Oh, your dad did. Yeah.
I didn't do well. I can't remember. I was in high school. I can't remember all the detail, but she said I was being snotty with her, or I can't remember, but I can just remember her face looking shocked and angry. And all that I can remember, she was going on and on about something, and I think I said just to stop it. Um, and then the evening my dad came, and he was so angry. It's the first time I saw my dad angry. He was furious that I made my mom depressed. It's my fault that she's depressed. I'm thinking, what is he talking about? She's always been depressed.
Hmm.
Um,
He was blaming you just because you finally spoke up to her and said no about something or disagreed, and then he would like to blame you so he didn't have to deal with her overall condition and depression. So not
Not my
only did you
fault.
have to deal with your mother's depression and her not letting you go, pulling you into it, but you also had to deal with your father's indifference and scapegoating of you and blaming and scapegoating you.
Anger never works. Um, I apologize, Dr. Susan. I'm getting confused what we're talking about. And then a part of me just shouts in me, I just want my wife back. I just want my wife back.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I
you
don't
are
want
now.
this.
Nothing else means anything.
Mm.
Nothing else means anything right now.
And I hate getting angry. I hate anger. It never works. It's anger is depression. Uh, Anger is I fuck up. Anger is my dad. I I just I just want to get along. Uh, I just want I just want to find a way to go back to the way it was. Um, and then I know a part would say, it's like a part of me is saying to me now, which I resent, is well, it was never good. Um,
That part of you is saying it was never good, but you want to say to it, you want to say anything that I had before is better than this. But you don't
and if,
really remember what was before right now because you're too overwhelmed by a sense of aloneness and absence of your wife.
that's bigger. That's a bigger feeling, Dr. Susan. I don't know if I'll survive this.
That's a pretty terrifying thing to not even know if you'll survive, psychologically survive. You'll survive physically, but I think you're afraid you psychologically won't survive, that you'll go crazy in some way or
Mm.
collapse.
When I get that panicky feeling, it feels like I'm losing my mind. Um, and then if I speak to my best friend, he just goes on how bad Susan has been. I don't want to hear it. And then my
Well,
mom,
it's irrelevant to you right now.
and then my mom phones me. My mom's depressed. And I think, could you just go away. It's not like I can tell her what's going on. And once I did tell her what was happening, and then she said, "Well, I didn't like her anyway." I'm thinking, "Well, okay, mom, that helps."
Mm.
And I said to her, "Well, that helps." And she said, "Well, don't get snotty with me." Well, there it's again. I get snotty.
Mm.
So I feel, except coming to you, there's really no one I can talk to about this. And I have been thinking of upping my sessions, but I have to be honest, I'm thinking of upping it so you can give me an answer how to get my wife back. It's like I wish you could tell me how to undo this. And no, that's not what we do, but I wish that. I wish I could find something magical just to undo this. Because I know uh, it's a wish. I know. I know she's not coming back. She said she's not coming back.
And you went through this with another wife who didn't come back.
Mm. Oh, that was I how I survived that. If it wasn't for the psychiatrist and medication, I don't think I would have survived that 5 years or after it. I had to take off 3 months of work. I just couldn't function.
Mm.
Quite embarrassing on a certain level too. You know, I quite feel ashamed about my inability to help myself. But again, there, she wanted an open relationship, and I didn't mind. You know, people might, but I knew she was going to find someone and drop me. So, and, and then she asked for the divorce. I, it probably wouldn't have happened, but I'd probably still be in that relationship if she didn't ask for the divorce.
Mm.
It's like I just don't want to feel this loneliness, um,
Yeah,
this
so
lack.
strong. But you're feeling it now because you're not numbing it out with that medication that you used to do. And now you have the sessions with me several times a week, so you're not, I mean, you might want to up them, but at least you weren't in this place before where you could talk about these things and feel these things in sessions with a therapist. So you were forced to just try to numb yourself out with the medication. Now you have a choice not to just do that, to start to listen to these parts of yourself and what they're saying.
Mhm. And as I told you, I
It's
also stopped
very
drinking.
agonizing. Oh,
As I told you previously, I stopped drinking 5 years ago. And there are times I feel I want to drink again. I won't, you know. But sometimes I feel if I can't tolerate it, I want to drown it. Um, but I won't. I'm not going to do that to myself again. It's why I have health problems, is I drank too much.
right. Well,
I'm
that
not
was
going to do that. But
self-sabotaging.
no, I am.
Addition
I'm not
to
going to do
whatever you kept repeating with your wives,
that.
the drinking just compounded everything.
That's also one of the things why she said she's leaving me is that I drank. That's 5 years ago. I stopped. And it's not like I was a difficult drunk. I would just drink and be in my office uh, um, because I couldn't take the critique anymore. Um, and I didn't want to get angry at her.
Mm.
Um, and she could, I could walk in and I would see her face and I know, shit, something is wrong or I screwed up. Um, and I
Mm.
knew something is coming. And then I would start drinking. I would listen. I have to be honest, I can't remember everything. And then just because I didn't want to fight with her or get angry at her because it gets nowhere, absolutely nowhere.
Mhm.
But I
Well,
won't. As I told you,
that's
I
what I
won't do it.
meant. And that's what I meant about the sadomasochism. We
Mm,
just got into this blame game of who did what to whom and never got to understanding the meaning of what you were
mm.
making each other feel that caused you to always get into a state of hatred towards each other.
Oh, oh. Now I understand. She said her dad was an alcoholic. I'm like him. That's one of the reasons she's leaving me. I said, listen, I'm not your dad.
Mhm.
And I stopped drinking alcohol. And I think I was once drunk and said to her, well, she's not such a bitch with me. I might not drink so much. And, that didn't get very far. Um, I apologize. I know I shouldn't speak to her like that. But I was intoxicated. And then when you said that, my first thought is, if I promise her I'll be better, not like her dad, would she come back? See, that's what my mind does.
Mhm. Yeah, your mind is begging, pleading, trying to find some way of of bringing her back when you feel so helpless to ever get a response from her now.
Mm. And I know it's not just that issue. I know it's been 28 years, and maybe the first few years were good, but we had children quickly, and then she got
Mm,
involved with the kids. I think I have to be honest. I think I did the same as my dad. If she was busy with the kids and happy, I was happy. I
mhm. You were happy to be more in your own world, more distant from her and the children then, because she was preoccupied with the children. That freed you up.
Yeah. Or at least from critique. I mean, it's not that I didn't want to spend time with her, but if she's happy, I'm happy. Um, and I worked long hours, and anything she needed, I gave to her. Um, and there were times she has a wonderful sense of humor, really a wonderful sense of humor. Um, and there are many things I find very attractive. I, but when she gets critical, Dr. Susan, I can't tolerate it. I get depressed and I withdraw.
That's what you mean by the critique of you constantly saying this was wrong or that was wrong or why didn't you do this or what
Mm,
was,
mm,
you know.
mm. And even my son said one of the reasons he doesn't speak to a lot is he's never good enough. Um, and he
He
told me
feels
even as an
somewhat the same
adolescent,
way with her, huh? That
yeah,
you did.
even as an adolescent, well, we had so much problems with him. He was very aggressive, did very well at school, so thank God. But man, he smoked dope and got into fist fights at school.
Mhm.
It's a miracle he got through school. He was smart, so he got through school. But him and his mom would get into shouting matches that again, I'm embarrassed to say I would think if I have to be at home at 6, I'll make it 7 because then I know that whatever fight is will already be finished.
You didn't want to be there and have to
No,
deal with it.
no,
So just like your father, you never stood up to
no,
your wife the way your father never stood up to your mother about what she did with you. Uh,
exactly. It's just I get anxious. My mouth goes dry, and I feel like an oncoming truck. There's nothing. What am I going to say? Um, and then she gets very angry at me, and then she gets very depressed and withdraws. And then I know, okay, now comes 2 weeks of wooing to get her out of the room.
mm,
The one thing I didn't do, I didn't blame my boys, but
uh-huh.
I don't think I helped them either.
You didn't blame them the way your father
Mm.
blamed
No, I
you.
told myself I'm not going to do that to my kids.
Mm.
I
So in
didn't do
that
that.
way, you had more control as a father than as a husband. Yeah.
Oh, I never thought of it like that. Mm.
How
I,
did how did you think about it?
I just thought to keep the peace was to keep the family together. That's what you do. I wasn't even thinking of me being a husband to my wife. I was just keep the family together.
Mm,
Get aggression, get out of control. And that's how I felt about my mom. Do good, because if she's going to commit suicide, it's my fault.
mm,
So I had to, um, it's a weird thought, but it feels at times I was my mom's antidepressant.
mm,
I had to work hard to keep her in life. Um, except now she phones me. I don't take her phone calls. Um, I'm trying to create some distance between her and me. You know, she's 81, and if she phones me and I hear her voice, I feel back in high school. It's too much. It's just I can't take responsibility for her too, but I do feel I'm responsible for her.
You still do.
Yes, I do.
Why don't you stop for a moment and see if you can really let yourself recognize that and feel it and recognize it, that you still feel you're responsible for her, that you don't feel you have any choice but to be responsible for her.
I hear your words. When I go into myself, I just feel panic. I
Panic.
hear your words and I take it in, but
Because if you're not taking care of her in your mind, you're not going to survive. So
yeah.
it's pure panic. The
Yeah.
panic is about the fear you're not going to survive. That you're going to go crazy to can't tolerate all this and
Or I killed my mom.
you can't tolerate the thought that you killed your mom, which is becoming more conscious now, that
Mm,
you fear that you're the murderer of your mother just by your behavior, just by being who you are, just by
mm,
having a life separate from her. You see that as an act of murder towards your mother.
mm, mm. And I had
And she
thoughts.
saw it that way, and you took on her point of view.
Mm, I did, and
Then
I
your father added on to it,
mm,
blaming you. You're making her depressed. What did you do?
exactly because that's what I hear in my mind. What you just said, that's what I hear. You did this. Don't
Uh-huh.
do this. And another part, I'm so embarrassed to tell you this. When I was in high school, I had a thought once which frightened me. Is maybe if she dies, all of this will stop. And that
Mm.
frightened me that I could think like that. That's a horrible thought for a child to, it's a horrible thought. Um,
Well, it's understandable. You wished for all the torture to stop, for all the agony to stop, for all the rage inside of you continually being coming up and being provoked. You wish for it all to stop. So you thought if she would die, like disappear, you wouldn't have the same feelings that you had to take care of her, the same thoughts that you're killing her. But of course, in reality, that's only the external mother. We're dealing now with your internal mother, and whether your mother dies or not, that internal mother is still there, and you keep re-enlivening her. You keep giving life to her. Yeah.
that, what you're saying feels similar to that panic I have trying to keep my marriage going. Uh, if I can only keep it alive, but it's not
Mm.
alive.
That would help to make you feel you'd be okay.
Mm,
But then you know in reality that when your wife did come back, whenever earlier on she would leave and come back, that it was never better. It was never better. And
no, it
you
wasn't.
you felt you would go crazy from her being there. Now you feel you go crazy from her not being there.
Yes. Mm. I'm fighting off panic as you're saying that, but that feels closer to how I live. Um,
No.
that's
When
that
you
is what
have
I
yeah, go
that
on.
is what I do.
Well, the panic is you have this visceral experience of the panic.
Mm,
You don't let it come to a more conscious level of understanding in words in your mind that you're afraid of not surviving and what those fantasies are unconscious still, not yet having become conscious
mm,
about what your fears of not surviving are, what you're really imagining about not being able to function, not being able to work, going crazy, being helpless without anyone taking care of you, and yet not being able to work or function. there are specific things that you fear.
mm,
But when you have the panic, it's just a visceral body expression of the terror without the clarity of putting it into conscious thought about what it is you're afraid would be your fate when you think of not surviving without her.
mm,
Because there are more specific things about fearing you won't be able to function, won't be able to work, you won't be able to take care of yourself, and nobody is there to take care of you the way you were trying to take care of your mother. So there are more specific thoughts that you could have consciously rather than just have this visceral reaction of panic.
that
There's a
feels,
whole range to be explored there, a whole unknown territory of your internal world and unconscious terrors of being all alone in the world without her and not surviving, what that not surviving means. There's a whole arena of your psychic fantasies that you haven't yet articulated about that.
mm, that feels in a strange way helpful to know that this is not the end.
Mhm.
Mm,
No, it's the beginning of exploring all this,
mm,
or what your terror is about not surviving, and why the visceral panic and the impulse, like I have to kill myself to end everything, is all part of something that needs to be understood and explored that we're just at the beginning of, not so it's not the ending, it's a beginning.
mm. Thank you. Um, I'll try to hold that when I'm so panicky. It's not the end. It's not the end.
Okay, okay, but it is the end of the session. It is time for us to go for today.
Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay,
Mm,
bye
thank you.
now.
Mm.
Okay, I will ask Loray, as I ask everyone in my supervision groups, um, how was that to be this patient or this conglomerate of these patients that
Yeah.
really has a pulse and a heart and brain of its own. So,
Mm.
what was that like for you to be this patient as you experienced him?
What I
In
found very helpful, Dr. Susan, was the way you attract the connection between the how he's trying to get out of how he's struggling with the withdrawing unit, the rejection, the anti-libidinal, and the panic associated with it as it's linked to the undoing of it with the rewarding unit. The way you linked and talked about the psychic pain to try to get out of it
mm,
resonated a lot for me. And as you kept on making those links, I started to get more in contact with his visceral panic, um, and his panic, especially suicidality, which is a part of an identification with his mom, is trying to get out of that pain. Um, but as we went on, the panic trying to get out of it changed into starting to see how it's related to how he represses himself. Um, so I felt the panic started to feel less something to be escaped, that it's linked with your way of trying to get out of something. And then I started to hear his father's critique more. Obviously, it's his fault.
mm,
So maybe there's some differentiation because, as you said, it's not guilt, it's persecution. Uh,
right.
um, uh,
Terror of retaliation
it was
and
retaliation.
annihilation through retaliation.
Mhm. I can't remember how you said it. I tried to make a note. Uh, it was when you started to talk about the overwhelmed feelings and how overwhelming it was, and then the critique coming. That's when you said that it felt like something opened up, like something spasmodic, relaxing, and then it's like, but this is linked to critique of you. So it's not just the wife's critique, this is happening in your mind with your dad as well.
Yes, yes, it's your
Um,
critique in your
and
mind.
yeah, and then it felt like the panic was still there, but it felt more open for me,
Mm.
in me feeling this one
Yeah,
specific
because if you recognize it's inside of you and not just from external other, then you do start to sense it. You there, you can face it and deal with it and have the effective experience that could lead to some change. So it, yes, so that was giving you hope. That's like the anti-libidinal ego part of you is inside of you. So
mm.
it's just your wife and what she would do or say, or your mother or what she would do or say.
And it was linked in the free association to previously he would withdraw or drink the sabotage too. And especially you touched upon it, I could feel it and I couldn't experience the difference between rage and panic uh,
Mm,
yet, but I could also feel anger coming up. So
mhm,
I'm not sure this one specific person I'm thinking about if he's able to differentiate panic and rage yet, or panic might he gets enraged because he's get panicky, or he gets panicked because he's getting enraged. Uh,
mhm.
I'm
Yeah,
of that I'm not sure yet, but I could feel yeah, it felt a bit different inside as I was trying to think him.
well, I think it goes both ways. But yes, he gets into a panic unconsciously. The terror of the this primal murderous rage
Mm,
so threatening that he immediately um, goes to panic,
mm,
but
mm,
in a visceral way, not allowing, being too overwhelmed with the terror to have thoughts. So in that thoughtless state, he can't have thoughts about what it is he's panicking about. He only can experience the visceral panic.
mm,
And that is a terror of the rage, of that primal rage and murderous rage, but it's also, yes, when he experiences the panic, it also builds more rage. It goes back and forth, it feeds on itself
mm,
because then he's enraged that he's stuck with this horrible condition of where he can't control things and he goes into panic and he feels like his life is gonna fall apart or end.
mm,
So, it's a back and forth between the rage inducing panic and the panic then inducing more rage.
mm,
But I think it does start with the primal terror of the murderous rage that's in him.
mm. No, I agree. And it seems that in terms of master sin, the helplessness, hopelessness, and then this suicidal feelings and then the homicidal, they're very close together, um, for this client. Um, I might need to tease it out a bit more with him.
Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah, well, the more you can help him see these distinctions, because there's no differentiation when he's fused in
mm,
with his
mm,
mother's pathology. And so the more you can help him find words to make distinctions and differentiate and have thoughts of his own, the more he can start to feel he has some agency of his own.
mm,
Um, and even feeling the loneliness is important rather than just an empty void to be able to tolerate having affects and knowing he's generating the loneliness and it's an affect state is that ultimately can be tolerated as opposed to just an absence that feels so totally intolerable. Like I talked about the abyss in Emily Dickinson when I was talking about Emily Dickinson, a paper of mine. Yes, so that that absence has to get to a higher developmental level of aloneness turning to a loneliness where there's actually is an object internally to the extent that you miss an object. That's a whole higher level loneliness from the absence and the void and the abyss to get to a place where there's an object enough in unconscious fantasy and in the internal world that you can feel a longing for it and feel loneliness. That's a whole higher level than absence and void is to be able to feel loneliness, because that implies there's a person you're lonely for. Someone exists in your internal world that you're longing for.
No, this is more absent, a void.
Yeah,
Mm,
he's much more at the just at the level of void, yes.
mm,
Which is one of, I know you teach Masterson so much, and he has the void state as part of his abandonment
mm,
depression.
mm. Yeah.
That, in his theories of crossing mind, you go from the abandonment depression states to the level where you can get to agency and aggression and ultimately loss and grief and the guilt and loss and the developmental mourning process. So, but in that primal part of the abandonment depression, before you're ever anywhere near having an object enough to have developmental mourning, there's just void, yeah, absence. And then the panic without words, right? Because there's no person to say you miss and feel lonely for. It's just a void. You're left, there's no one there, just means you're in a void. It doesn't mean you're longing for a person. There's no whole object person, just the absence of someone that could relieve you of the void and the intolerable state of abyss and empty void feeling.
Mm.
So
Thank you.
I yes, thank you, Loray. Thank you very much for sharing your experience of your patient through the role play and
Mm.
doing it in such a vivid way, and that allowed me to respond as the
Thank
therapist.
you. Oh,
Thank
the
you.
lovely men. Mm,
He's a lovely man. Yes.
mm, mm.
Yeah. So um, let's see, before we go on to our other part about the group process, and okay, I got a nice someone named Susan. I got a nice chat saying it was an excellent role play. So thank you, Susan. I want to make some time for other people in our group here. If they wanted to say anything about the role play experience as they experienced it and listened to it, what it might have brought up for them or any questions they had. Let's give a few minutes for that um, before we go on to the group experience. It's like in a supervision group, everybody gets involved. After the presenter who did the role play with me talks about how it felt to be their patient, we then get into a discussion with everyone about their thoughts, their comments about the role play, about the patient, about everything that might have brought to mind for them. Okay. Uh, okay. So everyone, as they come back, will go into the visualization. I'll do like half of what I would do in one of my groups, just going through with one internal other that you speak to during the meditation, and then sharing of the meditation experience. Okay, yeah, just a second. Okay, so I right now can't see the whole view of people. Let me see, gallery. Oh, there everyone is. Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask you all to close your eyes and breathe deeply. I'm going to do a guided meditative visualization experience, and we're going to go through one round with an internal other. I'll guide you through it as opposed to two that I do when I do my monthly morning therapy group. But we need to shorten it for the time limit. So, and we need to have some time for sharing. So everybody just close your eyes and breathe deeply, get into a relaxed position, and I will guide you through the meditative visualization. And we'll lead into the self-sabotage theme, which, Katja was trying to bring me back to. So that will be in the visualization here, the self-sabotage theme. Okay. Um, Just breathe deeper and deeper first. And as you breathe deeply, just sense your feelings as they flow through you. Let yourself feel the feelings both in the forefront of your feeling experience and in the background, and just let yourself feel all the different feelings that flow through you as you breathe deeply and breathe deeper and deeper. Allow yourself to have the flow of experience and feelings. Feel the feelings and breathe deeper. And now, as you breathe deeper and deeper, allow yourself to see who comes towards you within your mind, whoever comes to you from your internal world. Don't try to direct it from your head. Just allow whoever comes to come as you breathe deeper and deeper, and see if you can allow them to come in front of you so you can look at them, keep them there, and now as you breathe deeper again, begin to say whatever you need to say to this person about your experience of self-sabotage within yourself. Just allow yourself to say whatever comes to you, but saying it now to this internal person in your mind. You can keep them in front of you and say whatever you need to say about your experience of self-sabotage, what might have brought you here today, in fact, in your own self-sabotage experience. And just say it to this person and see how they respond or not. See if they react or respond or not. But the main emphasis is on what your self-expression, not on their response. The main emphasis is on whatever you need to say to them about your self-sabotage experience. And breathe deeply and allow yourself some time to say what you need to say about your self-sabotaging yourself in your own life to this person that's come to you, that's in your mind now, who you're keeping in front of you in your mind. So keep your eyes closed and breathe deeply, and then speak to this person who's come to you through your breathing, not being directed through your head. Say whatever you want to say about your own self-sabotage experience to this person. And breathe deeper as deeper all the time as you express yourself. Breathe deeper and deeper. Give yourself time to breathe and to open your inner space so you can feel and breathe and speak internally to this person and express yourself as fully as you can about your own self-sabotage as you see it in your mind now, um, and as you feel it in your feelings. If this other person you're speaking to does respond, does listen and respond as opposed to just react defensively or stay silent, you can see what they have to say to you as you continue to express your view of your self-sabotage. And keep breathing deeply. And now, as you continue to breathe, see what your gut has to say to this person as you contemplate your self-sabotage. Just allow your gut to speak. Gut, the area of the instincts and where there can be so much fear and rage and need and hunger in the gut area. Can be a lot of fear and a lot of rage, a lot of anger and need and hunger. Just see if your gut can speak for you right now as you breathe deeply and speak to this person. Let your gut speak to this person and say whatever the gut feels instinctively as it expresses your sense of self-sabotage in yourself. Breathe deep. Keep your eyes closed and breathe deep. Allow your gut to speak for you. Let your gut speak to this person in your mind. See your gut speak. And now, as you breathe deeply, deeper and deeper again, see if you can feel your heart area. See if you can go into your heart area. See if you feel a connection with this person who came to you in your heart area or not. If not, just breathe into your heart area. If you do feel a connection there, speak to the person from your heart about what you feel in your self-sabotage. Focus on yourself and how it might affect this other person who you're speaking to. Let yourself breathe deeply and speak from your heart as you keep breathing. Allow yourself to speak from your heart because the heart has very different feeling states than the stomach or gut. It's more the affects here of love and loss and grief and longing as opposed to the instincts of hunger and rage and fear. So through your heart, try to express whatever you feel now related to this person you're talking to, as you who has joined with you and been with you through your exercise here in self-sabotage, the focus on self-sabotage. Speak from your heart and allow those different affect states to occur in your loving, longing, grief, loss, those areas of affects, loss and grief related to love and loss, and also longing and yearning. Quite different feeling states from the gut area. There's a gut-brain connection, but the heart has its own domain. Speak from your heart or breathe into the heart area if you don't feel the connection. Now, as you continue to breathe deeply, it's time to go to say goodbye for now to this person. So keep your eyes closed and breathing and start to say goodbye for now, trying to keep them in front of you as you speak to them. And as you say goodbye for now, see where you hold back and breathe into the places where you hold back from letting go and surrendering into saying goodbye for now. There is a surrender in saying goodbye for now, but so many parts of you can tense up against it. So sense where you hold back from the surrender and sense where you can surrender to saying goodbye for now. And keep breathing deeply to allow that movement towards surrender. Yeah. Right. Say goodbye for now. And breathe again one more time, deep, deep breathing, and allow yourself to relax into surrendering and sense where you're tensing up and allow those areas to relax into the surrender of saying goodbye for now. And when you're ready, when you say goodbye and enough, good enough goodbye, just open your eyes, and the way I do it in all groups, I ask whoever wants to share their visualization first can begin the group sharing process and the group process. Now, of course, our time is limited today, but we have a little time for some people to share. And in the end, any questions about the Institute programs, certainly you can stay in with me for that, to ask that at the end. But right now, we still have some time for you to share, whoever wants to share, to open your eyes and volunteer to share with the group and begin that process.